Hi, everyone. This is Amanda Bido with Teen Services, joined by.
Jennifer Nisley. I'm one of the assistants in the reference department.
So, we are so excited today to share with you discovering Kinzua Dam history. There's a lot of misconceptions in this history, a lot of things people are like, oh, I didn't know about that. So, we're really hoping that you'll enjoy this presentation. So, we are going to start off with Jen talking about why build a dam.
So one of the reasons for the dam was an interest in producing hydroelectric power. In a 1929 report, the Army Corps of Engineers called for a series of dams for power production. However, the main reason to build a dam was to control flooding and protect the cities and towns from Warren to Pittsburgh. As you can see in this 1913 photo of the intersection of Market Street and Pennsylvania Avenue in Warren, flooding was a major concern. So the talk of the need for flood control began with the Flood Commission of Pittsburgh in 1908 and was revisited in 3 flood control acts. The Flood Control Act of 1936 included a series of 9 reservoirs, including the Kinzua Dam. The Flood Control Act of 1938 included the dam as part of general flood control for the Ohio River Basin. And the Flood Control Act of 1941 contained modifications for pollution abatement and regulation of stream flow to aid navigation. So Amanda's just going to click over to our digital collection, which is called the Allegheny Chronicles. It is in the Power Library's PA Photos and Documents. And so the first one that you'll see listed in our collections is the Historic Flood Control. It was published in 1943. And this is an archive of papers related to improvements of the river for flood control. So you are welcome to go onto our website and look this up and browse through this archive of papers.
Next, you can also find down here in our historic photos. So these are all the photographs that we have in our physical collection here in the reference room. But if you go here, you can search flood and you can see all the different photos we have under flood, and they're quite cool to look at. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't cool at the time. But you will see that there was some great floods, like 1894 was a big year, 1913 was a big year, 1918 was a huge ice jam, and many of the presentations we did this summer includes that 1918 ice jam. 1936, 1938, 1956, all huge years for floods. So as you notice, a lot of these big years for flooding was the same years that Jen just talked about for some of these flood control acts. There's no coincidence there. So next, let's talk about, this is a big history. Sorry. Go ahead, Jen. Jen's gonna show us a little bit of the map here.
So this is a map of the Allegheny River in 1938. So you can see the Allegheny River and some of its tributaries starting up in New York State and going all the way down just past Pittsburgh. And so you'll see the Conowingo Creek, the Tionesta Creek, the Oil Creek, and the Clarion River were all contributors to flooding heading down to Pittsburgh. And so Amanda's going to talk about what delayed the dam.
Okay, so like we said, we covered a lot of history just now, starting from 1908 up into the 1930s. So what delayed the building of the Kinzua Dam? So we're going to start with talking about, it was stopped in the 1940s by an Aubrey Lawrence and C.C. Daniels, who were part of the Public Lands Division of the Department of Justice, meaning the federal government. So they opposed the dam for it would flood Seneca lands. So at the time, many did not want to challenge the Treaty of Canandaigua of 1794. Many of you have probably heard about this in history class. This is the treaty that established the reservations in this area, especially the Seneca Nation that is just north of us in New York, right over the border there. But it also helped to establish, Chief Corn Planter was given a land grant by the federal government. Now he moved on to that land grant well before the treaty had started, but the government gave him like 1,500 acres of his choice. He decided to choose some land that was on the southeastern side of the Allegheny River. And this was specific for him and his descendants, although he did allow Senecas to stay on the land with them. Um, One really interesting fact here, this was and still is the last remaining Native American land in the state of Pennsylvania. And this was in 1791, that this was the last remaining land of Native Americans. So this was a gift, and like I said, he did share with other Native Americans. Now, after a big flood in 1956, there was even more talks about the dam becoming a real thing, something that is going to happen. And the Army Corps of Engineers started to really get this plans going. They even was on Native American land surveying without permission. And that's when the Seneca Nation Indians decide to push back, say, no, you cannot come on our land without our permission, because they wanted to stop these lands. They wanted to honor that treaty. They didn't want their reservation lands flooded. This was also going to affect many, many towns in Pennsylvania as well. And as you can see on this map, the corn planter grant would be partially flooded. The town of Corydon, the town of Kinzua, and many, many little tiny like villages and hamlets within that. Now, these places here in Pennsylvania didn't have money to really stand up against the federal government, but the Native Americans were gaining support of celebrities such as like Johnny Cash, who wrote a song about the Kinzua Dam, and many, many more. And they were gaining lots of media attention. And they also had their own government. So they were able to put some resources together, and they hired a Dr. Arthur E. Morgan, who at the time was a specialist in dams with his partner, Barton Jones as well. So they came up with some different plans, some alternate plans, and we're going to talk about those here. So first, we have the project that is proposed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and that is the Kinzua Dam. It means placing one large dam in the Kinzua Valley to create the Allegheny Reservoir and control the flow of water down the Allegheny River to Pittsburgh. This was set to cost about $119 million. That's around $1.2 billion today. Now, Dr. Arthur E. Morgan and his partners suggested many other plans, one of them being the most popular one being the sixth plan, where they rerouted water and rerouted the way the water flowed with several little dams, but this was going up into New York and going and flowing into Lake Erie. Now, this was deemed by an independent firm that was hired by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers called TAMS, or also Tippett's Abbott McCarthy Stratton firm. Now, there is some out there that speculate that every person that was in this firm was once a employee of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So they do believe there was some biasness to this. But they deemed that these projects were too expensive and not worth doing. So the other thing, it was shot down because water wasn't going to be rerouted down to Pittsburgh in the way that they wanted to when you're talking about the hydroelectric power that they wanted to produce with this dam. So that was another reason that it was turned down. So here you can see a map of the different alternate plan that is also called the Morgan Plan here. And then here is a map from the U.S. Army Corps in 1938. And this kind of shows you where that dam's going to be. And it shows you where the Allegheny Reservoir is going to be, which reaches all the way up through here. This is a large region that was very much affected once the dam was put in and the Allegheny Reservoir existed. And Jen's going to talk to us a little bit more about that after we talk about a brief timeline here. So in October 22nd, 1960, there was a groundbreaking ceremony of the Kinzua Dam. There was a large gathering for this, a lot of people upset, but also a lot of people just to see this happening. In 1962 and 1965, more protests started, but construction still continued on. The diversion of the Allegheny River started, demolition of towns started, and relocation of Route 59. And by September 16th of 1966, the dedication ceremony of the Kinzua Dam was inaugurated. So now Jen's going to talk to us a little bit about what was lost after the building of the dam.
All right, so as Amanda mentioned, there were several towns and villages that were affected, and these include Corydon, Kinzua, Morrison, Onneville, Quaker Bridge, Red House, Tuttletown, Sugar Run, and many other little towns throughout the Kinzua Valley. So you can see here on the left side a picture of the Kinzua Valley and one of those little towns. You can see the little houses peeking out through there in the valley. So Native American lands were also affected, like Amanda mentioned. 1/3 of the corn planter grant and 10,000 acres of the Allegheny Seneca Reservation in New York were also affected. And then the livelihoods of the lumbermen and rivermen were also strongly affected. So with the flooding in the spring times when the ice would melt, it allowed for large rafts and barges to carry lumber and other materials to Pittsburgh and back. So this quote from Bill Hoover about Kinzua, he says, in essence, floods were the critical element in the livelihoods of the woodsmen and rivermen. And we talk a little bit more about the waterways and how they're used in another session. So I encourage you to take a look at that. So looking at by the numbers, what was lost, let's start with the people, how many people were displaced. So in the village of Corydon, the population was 165 people, according to the 1960 census. In the village of Kinzua, we had 458 people. And then the Seneca population within the reservoir taking area was 922, according to the 1962 tribal rolls. Next, we have properties. So the number of properties acquired in order for the dam to happen was 1,280 properties. So breaking that down for you, we have 880 residential personal properties, so 495 homes and 385 cabins. In terms of commercial or public properties, we have 74. Those include 50 businesses, 13 cemeteries, 9 churches, and 2 schools. And then some miscellaneous properties. We're looking at mileage, so 280.7 miles, and these include 80 miles of power lines, 66 miles of communication lines, 60 miles of highway, 38 miles of pipeline, and 36.7 miles of railroad bed. And so I just wanted to provide a couple of photos on this slide that'll hopefully give you an idea of the personal impact that the dam had on the people in the area. So the first photo is a picture of the Chief Corn Planter Monument. So before the dam, this monument was located in the Corn Planter Cemetery, which contained 358 graves. So all of those graves had to be moved, as well as the 12 other affected cemeteries in the area. So they were all moved to this new Riverview Cemetery, which was located up in the hills near Willow Bay. And they moved approximately 60 graves per day. Can you imagine all of that being done per day, 60 graves?
Wow.
So this corn planter monument is now housed in the Seneca Iroquois National Museum in Salamanca. So if you want to go visit them sometime and see the original. And then there's a replica of the monument now that stands at that Riverview Cemetery. And then the second photo shows a house in the village of Kinzua that's in the process of being moved. So property owners were given the option to have their houses either demolished or moved. So this house is being raised up onto a truck to be transported and placed onto the owner's new property along the relocated Route 59. So this was a major operation, having all these things moved or demolished. It was just a major project.
Definitely major projects. So some fast facts about the dam. The height is about 179 feet. The length is 1,915 feet. Since its completion, the dam has prevented flood damages estimated to be in excess of $1.2 billion. Now remember, it was said that it was going to cost about that much in today's dollars when they created the dam. So could you imagine if the government is just now building this dam, they would have to spend the 1.2 billion, probably even more since all the stuff with COVID. And then on top of that, over the years, they've spent that much in just flood damage. So during the June 1972 floods resulting from Tropical Storm Agnes, an estimated 247 million in flood damages were prevented by the Kinzua Dam alone. So there was definite concrete evidence that the flooding had been subsided by the dam, and it was very helpful. Peak capacity of hydroelectric power is 400,000 kilowatts per hour. So again, it does generate all of that power necessary to Pennsylvania. So during our time of research on this, we went to the 60th reunion for the really, it was not just the village of Kinzua, it was village of Corden and many parts of the town that used to exist there. And Jen and I got to talk about different ways that we can help digitize their records so they can keep those for many years to come as a part of their history, so that way their legacy isn't lost. And we were well received by everyone, and it was such a wonderful time. So again, we want to thank the people of Kinzua for allowing us to be a part of their special day.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yes. So a little bit about some of the sources we use. These are two books that we use fairly quite a bit in our research. But we also want to let you guys know about extra resources that you can find. One is an online Kinzua Dam exhibit with the Seneca Museum, and another one being an online story maps of communities impacted in New York by the dam. So if you click on this, this is actually in partnership with the Seneca Iroquois National Museum. And what's so cool about this is you can explore these different maps. And when you click on different numbers and things like that, so like here, we'll quickly go into this so you can just see. But you're going to see numbers on a map. You get to click on those numbers, and it's going to tell you a story about what had stood there and the family histories and things like that. Our internet is being slow, so sorry about that. So again, we want to thank you for joining us for this presentation, and make sure you go back and you view the other sessions and take that quiz that you see there. It will get you into a drawing for some dips and theater passes. So have a great day.
All
Thank
right,
you.
thank you.